wasn't what we intended. Our food pantry was another difficult one. We could never get the food distribution quite right. You know, you just didn't have enough canned hams for everybody. And some people got beans and others got corn, and they didn't like that. And so again, we were the dispensers of charity, and it set us up in a control position. I was reading a book at that time. A fellow, a French philosopher by the name of Jacques Roux. He was writing about the city. And I came across a quote of his. I'll read it to you just briefly. And it just drove a knife in me. He says, almsgiving is Mammon's perversion giving. It affirms the superiority of the giver. It binds the recipient and demands gratitude. It humiliates him and reduces him to a lower state than he had before. When I read that, it just struck me. Are we reducing to a lower state those who we are here to serve? And when I really thought about it, I had to admit that I did enjoy that superior position. And I did expect gratitude. Of course, I covered that with a facade of humility. But I certainly did enjoy that more powerful position. And you know that scripture that says it's more blessed to give than to receive. Well, I was reserving that blessedness for myself. The closer I looked at what we were doing, the more I realized that our one-way giving was doing more to disempower those recipients than it was to empower them. It was diminishing their dignity. It was repressing their God-given abilities. It wasn't yielding the results that I had intended. That kind of giving, I observed a progression in that kind of our one-way giving that goes like this. We give somebody something once, and that elicited an appreciation. And folks said, oh, thank you. Really appreciate that. The second time we gave, it created a sense of anticipation. Oh, I wonder if this is going to keep coming. The third time we gave, it created an expectation. When do we get it? When's it coming again? The fourth time, it became an entitlement. When do I get mine? I'd rather have a turkey than a ham. It's an entitlement now. And by the fifth time, we created dependency. You can't stop. But we're depending on this. There's a progression that we did not intend from a sense of appreciation that ended up in dependency that was debilitating. We said we have to find better ways of doing our service than that. Relationships built on that kind of giving were almost always unhealthy. You didn't hear the whole truth. You heard enough of the stories that they knew that you wanted to hear in order to elicit what they wanted to receive. But there wasn't integrity in those relationships. A relationship built on need will persist and end up pathological. Fosters distrust, a lack of integrity. It's not what we were there to do. We were there to become community, to become neighbors, to enter into trusting relationships. That kind of giving prohibited that. So what do? It's, service projects, you do lots of, you get folks to come in on a weekend and like Habitat, build houses, that sort of thing. Well, we did that. And so we coordinated lots of groups coming into the neighborhood. I was sitting on my porch one day with Virgil, my neighbor across the street, who we had built a house for. And Virgil and I were sitting there talking as neighbors, and a church van went real slow down the street in front of the house. A bunch of young folks in there, see their faces on the inside. Virgil said to me, he said, I hate I said, really? I said, they built your house. He said, oh, I know. He said, I appreciate that. I appreciate all I've done. But they insult you and just don't even know that they're insulted. And then he went on to say that, one lady had been in their house and commented on how neat and clean it was. He said, I know what she had. She said what she believed was most of you black inner city folks live in a hovel. And then one lady commented on how well behaved and smart my children were. She said she didn't know she was communicating her underlying prejudices that inner city black kids are rowdy and dumb. He said they don't even know that they're insulted. He said, that takes care of it. How do we care rightly for those? There's a huge difference between crisis intervention and chronic response to need. And initially, we weren't making an accurate discrimination of those. We treated most everything as kind of a crisis situation. Now, a crisis situation demands an emergency response. When the earthquake hits Haiti, we got to get in there with food and medical and all kinds of supplies. That demands an emergency response. And when you address a crisis with an emergency response, lives are saved. We stop the bleeding. It's a redemptive process. But after the crisis has passed, when the basic needs of shelter and food and clean water have been met, now is the time to shift from an emergency response to a development response. How do you help a community rebuild their lives, their systems, their homes, their schools? You shift from crisis intervention to development.